Hello friends and welcome back to Zheng Guandian. I'm Zhen Fei. At the very start of today's programme, I must make a judgment. Tonight may well be the most pivotal night in the Middle East in the past 47 years. Not one of the most, but the very most. And that is the crux of the matter. Just after 8 o'clock this morning, Washington time, Trump posted a message saying, "Tonight the entirety of Iranian civilization will perish and it will be beyond redemption. I do not wish for this to happen, but it is very likely to occur." This is not diplomatic rhetoric, but rather a man wielding the world's most powerful military, telling a nation of 80 million people that their time will be up at 8 o'clock this evening. Vice President Vance also spoke in Budapest. "We are confident that we will receive a response before 8 o'clock this evening, whether it is positive or negative." Trump said in an interview with Fox this morning that 8 o'clock will come, and if it comes to that, they will suffer an unprecedented blow. So, my friends, as you're watching this programme, history may well be unfolding. Over the next 20 minutes, I'll take you through the current situation in its entirety. Today, the US military struck Kharg Island for the second time, while Iran is calling on young people and children to act as human shields. After 8 o'clock this evening, what are the three possible scenarios, and what is the latest discovery regarding how the F-105E fighter jet, piloted by the airman who was successfully rescued a couple of days ago, was shot down? Who is providing Iran with technological support behind the scenes? This is all solid information, so do pay close attention, everyone. At present, the core conflict of this war is centred entirely on the Strait of Hormuz, through which 1/6 of the world's oil passes every day, even in times of peace. Since late February, when the US and Israel struck Iran, Iran has blocked the strait, sending oil prices over $100 a barrel. Trump's logic? Open the strait or be bombed back to the Stone Age. He's given Iran plenty of chances. On 21st March, he issued a 48-hour final ultimatum, but postponed it 12 hours before the deadline. Then, on 26 March, he gave another 10 days. The deadline was 6 April, but it was pushed back by another day, right up until today. Today, Trump has issued the final ultimatum, saying he will not allow any more time. So, friends, do you think Trump will take action at 8 o'clock tonight? Will he really destroy the entirety of Iranian civilization? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section, but in fact there's no need to wait until 8 o'clock. The war has already clearly escalated today. First, let's talk about the most important military action of the day. The US military has struck Kharg Island once again. What is Kharg Island? For those friends who aren't too familiar with it, let me introduce it. It's a coral island off the southwest coast of Iran, covering less than 8 square miles, smaller than a third of Manhattan. However, it's just such a tiny speck of land. Yet it handles over 90% of Iran's oil exports. The entire lifeblood of Iran's economy is tied to this island. Its deepwater port can accommodate ultra-large tankers, loading between 1.3 and 1.6 million barrels of crude oil every day for shipment around the world. In the early hours of this morning, the US military launched a new round of airstrikes on Kharg Island, targeting more than 50 military objectives, including ammunition depots, air defence systems, naval bases and military bunkers, all of which were hit precisely. This marks the second large-scale attack by the US military on this island. But take note, this time all the strikes are on military facilities. Neither the oil fields nor the port were touched. This is precisely the most noteworthy aspect to analyse. Today in Budapest, Vance made a crucial remark. He said, "I don't believe the news about Kharg Island has changed anything. The president has made it very clear, unless the Iranians put forward a proposal we can accept or outright reject one, we will not strike energy or infrastructure targets." But he's given them until 8 o'clock tonight. So friends, did you notice? What the US military means is that all the military forces on the island have been completely wiped out. The air defence system is gone, the naval base is gone, the ammunition depot's gone. So what about this island now? It's now an undefended island, but the oil fields, port and pipelines on the island, well, I haven't touched them yet, but I could do so at any moment. This is like slamming a gun down on the table, only the trigger hasn't been pulled yet. As early as 1988, when Trump was interviewed by The Guardian, he mentioned this island. He said, "As long as a single bullet is fired at our people or our ships, I'll take action against Kharg Island. I'll go in and seize it." Those were his words 38 years ago, and today he's actually doing it. Privately, White House officials believe that taking Kharg Island would completely cut off the funding source for the Iranian Revolutionary Guard and could potentially lead to the regime's rapid collapse. In 1983, it took the US military 3 days to take Grenada, and Grenada, it covers more than 130 square miles, whereas Kharg Island is less than 8 square miles. Militarily, it's not a challenge at all. So, after 8 o'clock this evening, if the negotiations break down, will the oil fields on Kharg Island become the next target? Or could the US military even land and occupy the island directly? This will be one of the biggest uncertainties tonight. Today, Israel hasn't been idle either. Israeli airstrikes hit a railway bridge in central Iran's Kashan, resulting in 2 deaths. Another bridge near Qom was destroyed, and the motorway in the north connecting Tabriz and Tehran has been completely cut off. The Israeli military even directly issued a warning to the Iranian public, saying that appearing near trains or railways is risking your life. All trains departing from Mashhad have been cancelled, and the areas around Tehran, including Karaj and Fardis, have experienced power outages because power transmission lines and a substation were destroyed in the airstrikes. The campus of Sharif University of Technology was also bombed. Israel also struck Iran's largest petrochemical facility, which serves the South Pars gas field, the world's largest natural gas reserve. The head of intelligence for the Revolutionary Guard, Hadami, was also killed in the airstrike. According to Israel, he was effectively the number 2 figure in the Revolutionary Guard. As for Iran's response, this afternoon, Rassimi, the Secretary of the Supreme Council for Youth Affairs, called on national television for Iranian youths, athletes, artists and university students to form human chains around power plants across the country. He called this the Iranian Youth Human Chain for a Bright Future. You see, when a regime is on the verge of being bombed, instead of evacuating civilians or sending ordinary people to safety, it does the opposite, sending its own young people, even pushing children to the very front of bombing targets. Now, these videos have already spread. At the entrance of the Kazirun power plant in Iran, crowds have formed a circle, and there are children in the human chain on the White Bridge in Avaz. Commanders of the Revolutionary Guard have even called on Iranian parents to send their children to stand guard. Iranian President Pezeshkian has said that 40 million people have already responded to the Revolutionary Guard's call for volunteers to join the fight. You see, this regime is just like 47 years ago when Khomeini sent children out to clear landmines. 47 years later, his successors are still using children to shield themselves from bombs. These young people are being pushed to the gates of the power plant because the government wants to use their flesh and blood to manipulate international opinion. The people are not something they cherish or care for. Instead, they're expendable resources for the regime's survival, human shields. At the same time, the Revolutionary Guard has also escalated its military response, launching 7 ballistic missiles towards Saudi Arabia in the early hours of this morning. Near the Jubail petrochemical facility, debris struck the area. The King Fahd Causeway was temporarily closed, and the US military base in Kuwait was also attacked by Iranian drones, resulting in 15 American soldiers being injured. The United Arab Emirates also intercepted missiles coming from Iran. The Revolutionary Guard stated that if Trump really takes action tonight, Iran will ensure that the United States and its allies lose access to this region's oil and gas supplies for years to come. So the message is very clear. The underlying meaning is that if you attack me, I will make sure the entire region, including your allies, is thrown into chaos. And secondly, I will destroy the region's energy resources. This precisely shows that they have very few cards left to play. They are being suppressed militarily and isolated diplomatically. Therefore, all they can do is resort to this most basic form of coercion, using the threat to global energy supplies as a bargaining chip. But the more this is the case, the more necessary it is to thoroughly cripple them. We can't allow villains to control global resources, otherwise they could easily hold the world to ransom. In this episode, we've discussed the global energy issue and the previous energy crises. These crises were not caused by a genuine shortage of energy resources on Earth, but rather by villains disrupting the transportation and order of energy supplies. So, if you missed it, do feel free to go and watch. Now, many people are wondering whether there's still any hope for negotiations between the US and Iran. After all the threats and bluster, will it just end up with everyone back at the negotiating table bickering again? At present, it seems the chances of that happening are extremely slim. Pakistan, which has been mediating between the two sides, recently put forward the Islamabad Agreement. They suggested a 45-day ceasefire, with Iran reopening the strait and then discussing a permanent solution. However, Iran rejected this proposal. They refused to accept a temporary ceasefire, saying that the last time there was a temporary ceasefire, well, Israel attacked for 12 days. This time they are demanding a permanent end to the war and subsequently put forward their own 10-point plan. The core elements include a permanent ceasefire, a complete end to all conflicts in the region, and the establishment of new rules for passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Specifically, this means limited passage and the introduction of fees. We've discussed this in previous programmes. Additionally, they demand the lifting of all sanctions against Iran, as well as support for Iran's post-war reconstruction. Trump's attitude towards this plan is very important, but it's not quite good enough. The United States has put forward its own 15-point plan, which includes a 30-day ceasefire, the dismantling of Iran's nuclear facilities, restrictions on the development of its ballistic missiles, and the immediate opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's response to this was that it was utterly absurd, so the gap between the two sides' bottom lines is simply too great. Bloomberg reported today that right after Trump posted that message about an entire civilization perishing, Iran has already suspended the ceasefire talks. The New York Times, quoting 3 senior Iranian officials, said that Iran has formally notified Pakistan that the negotiations are over. However, the Wall Street Journal has a different report, saying Iran has merely cut off direct communication channels with the United States. However, indirect dialogue through mediators is still ongoing. Iran's Tehran Times also stated that the indirect diplomatic channel with the United States has not been completely closed. In addition, PBS quoted an anonymous official as saying, "It was said that Iran has now linked the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz with a lifting of some sanctions against Iran. The United States, for its part, is open to easing certain sanctions, especially those in the oil sector." So from this very small but important detail, one can sense that the back-channel negotiations are still ongoing, even though the official negotiation window has been completely closed. So if the back channel does exist, what might happen after 8 o'clock this evening? Firstly, at the very last moment, Iran could compromise and reach some sort of temporary arrangement. It might not be a formal ceasefire, but perhaps a cooling off period. For example, a temporary truce could be agreed upon, with negotiations continuing afterwards, because at his core, Trump is a deal maker. If the conditions offered by Iran are satisfactory enough for him, such a scenario could very well occur. However, this time Trump's rhetoric has been stronger than ever before, so the likelihood of him backing down is not very high. The second possibility is that the US military launches a large-scale strike against Iran as scheduled, wiping out the entire civilization. Thirdly, a limited strike plus diplomacy, maybe striking bridges or power plants. Trump then claims this is just the first wave as talks continue during the combat. Friends, which of these 3 possibilities do you think is the most likely? First, a temporary arrangement, second, a full-scale strike, or third, negotiations alongside limited military action? Friends, cast your votes in the comments section. Let's see how everyone thinks this situation is most likely to develop. Whichever it may be, after 8 o'clock this evening, the Middle East will enter an entirely new phase, either a breakthrough in negotiations or an escalation of war. But regardless of which scenario unfolds tonight, there is one issue. We really need to think this through. What gives Iran the nerve to be so tough? Militarily, they've been under attack for over 5 weeks now, and it's clear their military strength has been severely crippled. So what gives them the confidence to keep playing games at the negotiating table? Why do they dare to repeatedly demand such a high price? Today, a very significant piece of information has come to light regarding this question, and it's related to the US F-105E fighter jet that was shot down 4 days ago. On 3rd April, a US F-105E attack aircraft was shot down over Iranian airspace. We all know this was the first time since the conflict began that a manned US fighter jet was hit within Iranian airspace. We know that traditional anti-aircraft missiles rely on radar to detect aircraft, which means constantly emitting radio waves into the sky, and when those waves bounce back from the plane, you know where the aircraft is. But the problem is that American military aircraft are equipped with radar warning devices, so as soon as you switch on the radar, they know about it. Then they can immediately take evasive action or even counterattack. This time, however, the system Iran used to hit the US F-105E fighter jet was not one of those old-fashioned radar-based air defense systems. Now, many media outlets have analysed the situation and believe that Iran most likely used two types of technology. The first is passive infrared detection technology, which does not emit any radar signals at all, but instead relies solely on capturing the heat emitted by the aircraft's engines to lock onto its target. Since there is no radar involved, the warning devices on American military aircraft are unable to detect it, so the plane is flying through the air completely unaware that it has already been targeted. The second type of technology is the so-called third Khordad medium-range air defence system, which Iran claims to have developed independently. On the surface, this system is domestically developed, but its core technology is almost identical to that of Russia's Buk M2. This air defence missile has a range of over 28 kilometres and is highly manoeuvrable. So although this system appears to be developed by Iran itself, its core technology is actually almost identical to the Soviet-era Buk M2. The Buk M2 also has a range of over 28 kilometres and is highly manoeuvrable. So behind these two technologies, one can actually see the influence of both Russia and the Chinese Communist Party. Let's start with the Russian connection. Reuters reported last year that Iran had attempted to purchase nearly $600 million worth of Verba man-portable air defence missiles from Russia. Russia not only sold missiles to Iran, but also provided satellite intelligence and information on the locations of US military targets. More importantly, they also shared their complete air defense combat experience, which had been tested on the Ukrainian battlefield directly with Iran. So Iran's current third Khordad system is essentially an Iranian upgraded version of Russia's Buk M2. As for the central route, it provides a more modern supplement. International media and current military analysis institutions have noticed this. As for the CCP, it has sent HQ-16, HQ-17A1 and HQ-9B air defence systems to Iran. These feature China's upgraded radar and electronics, plus ongoing supply chain support. 80% of the world's key drone components come from China. Many of the navigation systems and gyroscopes in Iranian missiles are supplied by Chinese companies. In a report published this March, the Atlantic Council directly named China and Russia, stating that both countries are operating through a complete supply chain. They continue to support Iran's military industry, so it can be said that while Russia provides mature air defense systems and technical expertise, the Chinese Communist Party offers even more advanced radar, missiles and supply chain support. So the combined efforts of both sides have enabled Iran's air defence capabilities to undergo an upgrade. In other words, the missile that struck the US F-105E this time was not solely the work of Iran. Behind it were Russian technology transfers and the legacy of Soviet air defence support. With a Soviet legacy coupled with the modern weapons supply chain from the Chinese Communist Party, this is also one of the reasons why Iran dares to repeatedly stall at the negotiating table, even under such sustained and intense firepower attacks. But no matter how much he tries to stall, his time is running out. Let's wait a few more hours and see what happens after 8 o'clock this evening. That's all for today's programme, just a quick update on the latest developments. You're welcome to subscribe to True Perspective. We'll continue to follow the real-time updates after 8 PM tonight, so do remember to subscribe. If you enjoy my programme, please give me a like and share it with your friends. I'm Zheng Fei, and we'll see you again soon on True Perspective. Don't miss it.